Rightio guys, so you should have had time to complete that. We're now moving on to Roman armour. Now, of course, I imagine that when everyone pictures a Roman legionnaire in his armour, they're of course going to move themselves to what is known as the lorica segmentata. Now, the lorica segmentata, as we have a picture of our lovely demonstrator here, it was a series of iron bands that were clasped together using leather. The next image I've actually got is a much better example of it. We've got a little Roman legionnaire here, his little helmet and all of his weaponry, his pilum there, his scutum there. Doesn't have his greaves on, which is kind of silly of him, but we'll move past that. And if we'll take a closer look at the segmentata, we can see that it's a series of iron bands with the leather that clasps it together, and it would use lace to tie it together at the front and the back. Now, it is quite maneuverable in the shoulders because they can lift the arms up and down, and is quite heavy. Interestingly, this armor was actually only really employed later in the periods past the Republic. It would have been about 9 BC until probably 300 or so AD that this armor type was seen in use. The much more common type of armor, which is the one we're moving on to next, was the lorica hamata. Also, just before I forget, lorica literally translates to cuirass or torso armor, breastplate. It just basically means armor. So, we'll have a look. This is a digital representation of a classical Roman hamata. We'll notice it's effectively chainmail. It may have been fastened with a belt. What was something to notice about this was that it had shoulder protection as well, which was original chainmail, it would go the entire length of the arm. Chainmail didn't usually go this far. Okay, moving on, we should have lorica squamata, and this was a series of iron circlets that were sewn into a fabric. It was quite maneuverable, but this wouldn't have really been seen on the legionnaires. This is more likely to have been seen on the auxiliaries, who were the people who moved with the legion, not the actual legionnaires or citizen body. Now, we'll be moving on to the scutum, and this is the other thing that you will probably associate with the Romans. It's got its nice square shape with a little bend in it. Originally, it was more of an oval shape, but as the Legion progressed, they started to prefer the square shape due to the protection that it gave. Now, one thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the horizontal arm point. Now, this wasn't entirely common of the time, as normally they would have 2 points where you see those 2 straps are, where you would put your arm through and hold it, and this forced you to hold it forward. The Romans held it like this, which allowed them a much greater form of movement, allowed them to have the arms straight. What they would normally do in the fighting is they would lead with this shield. They would plant their foot down with the left foot in front and the right foot behind, and they would bash the shield into the enemy before moving to the side and stabbing them with the gladius. So that was the purpose of having the horizontal grip. Now, moving on, we find we're at the palma, and this is your tiny little shield that was given to the auxiliaries. Notice it still has the horizontal grip. It's got a reinforced knob, which stops the hand from getting buggered up if it gets shot with an arrow. Okay, we've got the galea, and this is literally the helmet of the Roman legions. Now, once again, this is a recreation. Most of the images that I use are actually recreations. Now, if I have a closer look, we can see that it is reinforced at the front. Reinforced at the side, giving you a nice little visor, so if anything comes down from the top, it's not likely to hit the face, with cheek plates and the back of the neck protection. And this back of the neck protection was quite effective because of the way the armor would hold it up. And if we look at the front, reinforced. Now, moving on, we have the manica. It wasn't uncommon in Roman legions, but you'll probably recognize this more from watching your gladiator movies. This was the arm protection. It would go down the left arm, which wasn't protected by the shield, and it was made like the segmentata, with bands of iron held together with clasps. Once again, this is a replication. That's why it looks so shiny. And moving on to our last portion of armor are the greaves, and these are effectively the shin pads of the Roman legion. They would have been strapped to their legs, and because the shield did not protect the entirety of their body, it would allow them to have that little bit of extra protection. Their shoes would have been sandals, which are effectively a bit of leather strapped to the foot. So that is why these do not have the shoe attachments with it. So we'll go on to our summary. which when it wants to show up, there were several types of torso armour. The lorica segmentata was a series of iron bands clasped together with leather and was common of legionnaires from around 9 BC until the 300s AD. The lorica hamata was one of the most common types of armour and was a series of metallic links, chainmail, with extra shoulder protection. The lorica squamata was a collection of small iron circlets sewn onto a fabric. It was commonly worn by auxiliaries of the army and rarely by the legionnaires. The scutum was the Roman shield. It was larger than average and square-shaped to protect the shoulder from knee to neck. The palma was a small round shield mainly used by the auxiliaries. The gallia was the Roman helmet, which had forehead, cheek and neck protection. It was mainly created using iron. The manica was, like the segmentata, a series of iron bands clasped together to protect the arm. It was usually sporadically by the legionnaires and often by gladiators. Also, a side note, this manica, it wasn't always iron, it could be leather. And finally, the greaves were iron shin pads used to protect the Roman soldiers' legs. Okay, I would now take that time to fill out your worksheets and move on to the final video when you have finished that. Or if you're a smart cookie, you've been filling it out during it. I've left it a bit late to tell you that, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, I'm afraid.